people of our church took a survey, and they were ranking our church in a variety of categories, and the lowest category we had was effective structures. Part of effective structures involves training so that people who are involved know what they're supposed to be doing. So tonight is in some ways a step towards helping better train and equip ourselves. But also, if you've been watching the news at all in the last couple of years, you know that really there's no place that's safe, sadly. In Minnesota, just, what was it, a couple days ago, 2 kids are dead because of a shooting. And so there are a lot of components of safety we're going to talk about. We're not going to fix everything tonight, but we're at least going to start the conversation. And as soon as we get the tech ready, I'm going to have our good friend and officer, Devin Lee, present to us a few thoughts about safety and what to do in a worst-case scenario if there was to be a shooter, or what can we do in the event of somebody who's causing a big disruption. But we're going to talk about more than just that tonight, and I'll kind of outline our night. We may go a little bit out of order, but we're going to talk some about general safety, just some basic things that we should be aware of. We're also going to talk about volunteer safety, and I'm going to have Nita share briefly on that. And then we're going to talk about social safety. And this one is probably going to be the most fun, I think, because there's some really interesting stuff we're going to get into with that. But let's start just a little bit with general safety stuff. Does everybody know where the exits are in the church? Okay. Yeah. Right. So it's good for us to know, in case of emergency, where are the exits? You can get out this way. You can get out this way. You can get out that way. If you had to, you could get out some windows. We hope it wouldn't come to that, but it's good to have those windows, and they're not too far off of the ground. What about smoke or fire extinguishers? Does anybody know where the nearest fire extinguisher is? Closet? Okay. Yeah. To be honest, I don't actually know from here where the closest one is, but this is something that we need to look for. We need to find out. We have them. They're around, but these are things in an emergency. If there were to be a fire, we would be scrambling around not knowing where it is. So that's your homework before you go home tonight, if you want, or tomorrow. It's like a scavenger hunt. See if you can find where the fire extinguishers are. What about a first aid kit? Does anybody know where a first aid kit is? Helen knows. Jane knows. It's in the ladies' restroom in the closet, which we're going to do something about that, because if there's a need for first aid, it'd be a little awkward if there aren't ladies around to go in there and get it. So we're going to get another one. We can keep that one there. We're going to get another one. We're going to let you know where it's going to be placed. These are just some basic things that we've kind of fallen asleep on that we're going to start working on, but things to think about with safety. If you see unsafe conditions, like in the wintertime and there's ice in the parking lot, let us know. Let a deacon know. We had a fall in the parking lot this last winter, and someone got hurt. And we want to keep people safe as much as we can. Yeah.
Lost your mic a little bit there.
Oh, can you turn it up a little bit? Yeah, thanks for that. So we're going to talk more about safety when we get the Officer Lee's slides going. But let's go ahead and talk about volunteer safety. And it is kind of a two-way thing. I'm going to have Nita come up. She's our volunteer coordinator, and she's going to talk briefly about, if you volunteer, what are the expectations as a volunteer?
Oh, and when I took this job, I thought it was going to be easy.
It doesn't pay to think.
Oh, well, it doesn't pay definitely to think it was. I should have thought it's going to be really, really hard. Then it would have been really, really easy, maybe. So, background checks. That's what this is all about. Volunteer background check. So who has to do one? Anybody know? NAD wants everybody who volunteers to do the background check. Oregon Conference, at the minimum, you should be, if you are an elder, if you are a deacon, a greeter, a treasurer, a children's Sabbath school teacher, or an assistant in that room. You work in Pathfinders, you volunteer. Children's story, that one shocked me. I had no idea that one. Any individual who is up front on a regular basis is considered a person in the church that could be of authority. Somebody could think of them as an authoritarian person, and if they told them to do something, they would think they needed to do that. Wherefore, if you're up front, if you are volunteering for VBS, if you work in community service centers, if you are in the PA area and you have kids up there on a regular basis, you need to be doing the background check. So, I have failed because my percentages suck. They're in the, way down there. They're down the drain. So we're going to fix that. That's my clue. That's my thing. The other thing is, I just want to remind you that if you are planning a church outing, you cannot have a church outing without, number one, you having that background check, especially if it's off the church property. The other thing is, you need church board approval before you have that. You cannot call your members up and say, hey, let's just get together this Saturday night. That is considered a church activity. If you are having your classroom get together, you need that church board approval in order to be covered with insurance. The church insurance covers everybody, whether you're on this property or whether you're somewhere else. Wherefore, you need that church approval. The other thing that if your plans change, and this became very apparent to Pathfinders several years ago now. We had no idea, thank goodness the group called. If you get to let's say you were going to go to a park, and you get to the park, and the park is closed, or the park is having this great big party that you don't want to take your group to, and you need to change spots. You need to call the powers that be. The pastor, if you're Pathfinders, you can call your coordinator, the pastor, the head elder. If the pastor's gone, call your head elder. Let them know what you're doing so that they can say, okay, yeah, that's fine. We know what you're doing. Very, very important for the purpose of insurance. The other thing that I just want to quickly touch is when you're in classrooms. How many adults? 2. What if I don't have 2 adults there and a kid has already arrived? The next best scenario, leave the door open. Do not close the door. Leave the door open. Sit where you are in plain sight of anybody walking by. Don't sit behind the door or back over in a corner. You want to be where people can hear you and see what is going on in there. So, I know that for many of us, the computer is an issue. And I've had many people that were trying to do their background check and kept running into an issue with the group that does our background checks. They couldn't get to where they needed or whatever. So I have printed off paper. Paper. We all know how to use pen and paper, right? Paper background checks. You can at least fill it out and send it into the conference office. Every 3 years. So once you do it, you're cleared for 3 years. If you are not sure when the last time you did this, because you may have done it here, you may have done it in a different church. If you're on the rolls for a different church, you can actually go into the background place and change what church you need that background to go to, what conference you need it to go to, if you need help with that. If you want to do the computer one and you need help, I will be available on Thursdays and Fridays. But you have to make an appointment with me because I live in Prineville and I don't just run down here at a moment's notice. No. No. This is a simplified background check. They are checking for certain things. They're checking only so many years back, but they're looking for, obviously, they're looking for any sexual abuse. They're looking for physical abuse. If you have been called into the police department for multiple anger issues, that's a concern then for the safety of the people within the church. That's what they're looking for. We don't care if you, in your teenage years, did something that you weren't supposed to have done. We don't care. That's in the past, and we leave it there, okay? No, we do not have access to any of that. So everybody, regardless of whether you have a public school system one, whether you are cleared with your local hospital, hospice, it doesn't matter where else you have child or an abuse background check, you have to do it through the church. So the church one has to be done through the church.
That's because the agency only sends out to the ones that you connected with.
Correct. So we do not have access. If you work in the school district, you may be cleared, but we have no access to those records. Those are private, and they are kept with the school district, not shared with the church. So that's why it has to be redone. Uh-huh. I have that as well. Well, actually, maybe I didn't bring it. But if you go to Oregon Conference SDA /risk management, there is a link there for the background check. And when you go online, it then sends me a thing saying that you are cleared for X amount of years. And so I know if you are unsure, you can call me and let me know, and I will let you know how many years you have. If you're a policeman addressing the crowd here, he is our guest. And we can have people that are temporary, just like Pathfinders could have somebody come in and teach one honor. that isn't there on a regular basis. They could teach one honor, but we cannot leave that person alone with the group. But he would still do the background check. So the other thing that I do have some cards that if you want my phone number, my email address, you can have that. And I had thought of one other thing, but now I don't remember what it was, so it must not be super important. Minors. If you are a minor and you are working as a deacon, an elder, or any of those other capacities, there's a minor form. It is not as intense of a background check as an adult one. And the parent has to sign off on it. And there's a code of conduct that the parent goes over with the child so that they know. So if you have children that are working in that capacity, I have forms for you.
Let's give Nita a hand. It's not an easy job to keep after people and try to get them to fill out these forms. Let's invite Officer Lee up. Give him a hand. Yeah, he's like family. He's part of our church family.
So John asked me tonight to come and talk about just some general safety stuff. I'm going to present what's called the standard response protocol. It's something we use in the schools frequently. It's pretty basic. It's pretty easy for everyone to understand. So we'll go through that. If you have any questions at any point in time, raise your hand, holler out, ask away. Unfortunately, the places in our society that should be the safest are not always so. More and more frequently, we're seeing incidents at schools and churches, places that we wouldn't have thought would be vulnerable to these type of attacks. So having a small basis of knowledge of what to do in the situation when and if it comes will allow you to potentially protect yourself and protect the other people around you in that situation. I like this quote, the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. So that's the first step that you guys are taking today, right? Is you guys are starting to plan on how you can make your church a safer place to be. Standard response protocol is a uniform plan and practiced response to any incident that is in any way safety related in church, organization, school. It uses a very specific vocabulary which allows for easy understanding, and it's flexible. We're going to talk about a few statistics. I'm not going to bore you with too much information as far as that goes, but we're going to talk about the terminology of hold, secure, lockdown, evacuate, and shelter. Those are the 5 vocabulary terms that you would want to know. Recommend that you use these when you're planning, when you're putting together your emergency response plans as a church, because it's the terminology that responding safety agencies are going to be using. Law enforcement's going to be using that terminology, as is medics, as are medics. Anybody else that's coming into the building are going to be using these same types of thoughts and vocabulary. So having a common understanding makes it more efficient for everybody. When you're looking at most of the mass casualty events, they are over quickly. It is a tragic and violent and horrible thing, but they are generally pretty short in duration. Most are over within 5 minutes, and almost all of them are over within 10 minutes of the initial act of violence. And 98% of the time, it's one bad actor. Occasionally you see something else, but it's almost always one bad actor, and it's frequently a handgun or a rifle that is being used. That being said, a mass casualty event, an attack can happen with any kind of weapon. It can be a blunt instrument, it can be a knife, but typically we're looking at responding to a firearm-related incident. We can skip that one. Generally, this just kind of goes to show that the motivations are typically some kind of revenge or notoriety, or there's some kind of emotional response that triggers the event. So I would recommend when you guys put together your emergency response plans, going to an organization called I Love You Guys. They have all of these response kits. It's all free, and printing out these signs and placing them in each of the rooms. It's just another way to make sure that everybody's on the same page. If something happens and people are getting flustered and they're not sure what to do, having that visible in their space gives them the opportunity to refer to that and remind themselves when stress and the fight or flight starts kicking in. So again, it's a set of actions and guidelines that talks about what we're going to do in these specific situations. So the first term that you would want to know would be a hold. A hold is basically utilized when something is happening inside the building that you don't want everybody else to be involved in. So say there was a medical issue in the sanctuary or in the hallway outside the sanctuary, you could activate a hold procedure where no one would come, like everybody would basically stay in the areas that they're at. If you're in a classroom, you stay in the classroom. If you're in here, you stay in here. If you're in the fellowship hall. And it allows the people in that space to resolve whatever that issue is. It's not going to be an immediate threat to the entire church, but something that would necessitate easier access for medics or just privacy for the person who is having that medical issue. So it's pretty basic. You stay where you're at and you wait there until someone who's responsible gives the all clear. And like I said, typically in the schools, we're using that for a student who is in a specific area that's having a tantrum or a fit, causing a scene. We don't want that to be the focus of everybody in a transition period. So we'll lock that area down. Or, like I said, medical, lots of kids with diabetic or other medical issues. If something like that is happening at the school, we will ask people to stay where they're at and keep them in that area until medics can come in, clear the problem, or nursing staff and whatnot. The second would be secure. So in a secure situation, you're looking at something potentially outside of the church that's happening. In the schools, we'll use that for if there is a threat outside the building, say our patrol teams or our detectives are serving a search warrant near the school. There's a suspect on the loose who could potentially be headed in that direction. We'll let the school know. They'll lock the doors, bring everybody inside, but from that point on, it's business as usual. So, and then we'll use that for things also like animals on the loose. And we locked down one of the middle schools one time because there was a report of a cougar in a neighborhood. I don't know, we never saw the cougar, but we locked it down until made sure that everybody's inside, there was no threat to them, but they could continue on with their regular business. A lockdown is initiated when there's an immediate known threat. So If there is someone out in the hallway who is making verbal or substantiated threats, firing a weapon, some kind of immediate threat to safety of the people in the building, that's where having these protocols is probably the most important. And we'll kind of go through what steps to take in each of these situations in a little bit more detail. But the general rule of thumb for a lockdown is to secure all the doors, to get away from the access points, and to turn off all the lights. Generally speaking, there has not been an incident of a mass casualty event where the doors were locked and secured and that perpetrator entered that locked and secured room. It is always a situation of opportunity. So they will go to the easiest target where they can inflict more damage rather than targeting a specific individual in a secured area. Because as we said, these events are over typically in the 5 to 10 minute range. And a law enforcement response to these incidents or suspected incidents in our area is between like 2 and 5 minutes. So we're quick. We send a lot of resources. I know at the incident in Safeway, the active threat there were over 300 officers that responded from multiple different agencies, and the first ones were on scene in a couple of minutes. So the response will be overwhelming. You will be safe. The best thing that you can do is to put yourself in the hardest to reach space and secure that door. That being said, we'll kind of go into a little bit more detail. I can't tell you what your fight will look like when that comes. That's going to be a very personal decision when and if that time comes. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is lock the doors, remain out of sight, turn off lights, and hide. But if you have the opportunity and someone's maybe trying to get in, if you're in this area, getting out this door may be the safest way to protect yourself. I'm not going to tell you 100% you should always do this or 100% you should always do that. Use your best judgment in the situation, but typically speaking, locks, lights, and out of sight. If you're in this area or another area and something's happened, you've secured the door, the next thing you're going to want to do is to designate 1 or 2 people in that area to call 911 and start getting help. You don't want everybody in the room on the phone because that's going to overwhelm, the dispatchers, but it's also going to overwhelm the system and people aren't going to be able to get through. So taking that time, designating 1 or 2 people to make those phone calls is going to be more effective than everybody doing so. And then worst case scenario, defending your area. You can do that in a lot of ways. In here, I know they're heavy, but the pews in front of doors, chairs in front of doors. I mean, it's not ideal, but you could club someone over the head with it if you needed to. There are a lot of different options to protect yourself and the people in the room with you if push comes to shove. And as I said before, your best option may be to get out. We tell people that in the schools frequently. If something's happening in the gym and you're on the entire opposite side of the school, it might be best for you to just bounce out your classroom door, take your students, and go. It's going to be less opportunity in a small confined space like here, but it still might be your most effective, especially in a room like this where you have multiple exits and many entry points. So the term evacuate is pretty straightforward, and you're going to use that in a situation where maybe you have a fire, gas leak, something to that effect. And those are things that you should know what that plan is. and be able to execute that pretty quickly. There should be a structured evacuation plan that the church should have, and whoever's in charge of enacting that plan wants to have some considerations for the most vulnerable people in the building, like children, people with disabilities, and elderly who aren't able to evacuate themselves. So someone should be considering those, and that plan should be known by, at the very minimum, the staff, deacons, ushers, anybody who is in a position of authority or knowledge, and it should be drilled occasionally. So again, if and when that happens, it's second nature. You already know what you're doing, because in a stressful situation, we tend to forget things. So the more often we do them, the easier it is in that stressful situation to rely on that training and that experience. And then shelter, again, that's pretty self-explanatory. You're going to use that in a situation like a tornado or an earthquake. There's not a lot of opportunity for the need to shelter in this area, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. So again, in a hold situation, clear the passageways, get into the rooms, make sure that the areas for medics and law enforcement personnel, if that's what's needed, are able to get in and out. But otherwise, in a hold, you're locking your doors, but business as usual. Secure, again, I think we went over most of this. Again, it's everybody outside the building comes inside, doors are locked, and then business as usual. Lockdown, again, lock sites, out of sites, close and lock the doors. And Pastor John and I talked about some ways that would be easier to secure doors and areas of the church that make it so you're not having to think in the situation. It's a very easy thing to do. We talked about, and the schools will use all of the doors to every classroom or office in the entire school is locked. It's in a perpetual state of lock. And when class is in session or students are in the building, there's a rope that's looped around the handle of both doors. The door closes to the point where the rope prevents it from being completely shut. And in the event of a lockdown or some other safety threat, instead of trying to lock the door with your key or unlock the door with your key, you're able to quickly get into the room, pull that door, and the door comes closed. And you do that because your fine motor skills when your stress is super high. I'm sure some of you have experienced that, where you're trying to do something that requires finesse, and your body's just not working. So just implementing some small changes like that can make a big difference in an emergency situation. Evacuate. The big thing would be to leave most of your possessions behind. Cell phone, take a cell phone with you if you can, just so you can make the emergency phone calls. And again, once you're outside, designate 1 or 2 people to make the phone call rather than having everybody in the church dialing 911 at the same time. Something that the school does in these situations is a reunification. Probably not going to have a need for that for the most part within the church. The exception would be having a plan to reunify children with their parents. And that can look a lot different than it does at the school where we're busing kids to the fairgrounds or Highland Baptist or other locations and setting up a massive reunification event. Here, that could be just, hey, if something happens at the church, we're going to meet in one of these 2 locations. We'll send that out via text to everybody, and we'll get you connected back up. It should be pretty self-explanatory and straightforward here. A shelter, again, Central Oregon, you're most likely going to deal with an earthquake, or a volcanic eruption. Maybe a fire, again, here, it's not really, it would have to be a pretty significant fire event. This is really not super relevant to you all. So the environment that you're in dictates how you respond to these types of situations. So the important thing to take away is to know where your building is vulnerable so you can make necessary changes or pay attention to the areas that you know are weak in security. A church is a unique environment, right? In a government building or a school, we can do a lot to restrict access, but that also makes it a lot less welcoming and a lot harder to get into. That's not something that you're really looking to do necessarily in a church. So it's about figuring out what that balance is and what you're comfortable with as far as the vulnerabilities and how you're going to mitigate those. Again, like if something happens when everybody's in Sabbath school classes or in here for church service, that looks different than if it's between and everybody's in the hallways. So in that circumstance, you're going to want to grab as many people into those areas as you can and then secure it as we talked about. But it's going to be a little bit more difficult and a little bit more fluid, and it's just going to require some thought and planning in those moments. And then is the event, like, is the threat outside? Is the threat inside? Where is it coming from, and how are you going to address that? I mean, I think everybody's pretty familiar with what an active threat is, but an active threat is a situation where the threat to life and injury is present. So an active threat can be anything from an active shooter to a bomb threat, and someone who's just not supposed to be here. Maybe someone has a restraining order in place and they're trying to force their way into the church. Maybe they're not intending to do anything. Maybe they are, but that could be an active threat situation. And in that situation, you would want to have a plan if that situation was known to you in advance to mitigate that. Violent staff members or visitors, and unfortunately, terrorist threats. Terrorist organizations, groups target areas that are easy, where they can inflict a lot of damage, and unfortunately, church is one of those areas where they can do a lot of damage with less resistance. We just talked about all of this. The general rule of thumb is if you overhear someone saying something that's concerning to you that you believe is a viable threat, report that to somebody. Report that to Pastor John, an elder, deacon, somebody who can be a second set of eyes or ears to the situation, can look at it, and can help evaluate what potential threat is and what the potential response is going to be. And think of it from the lens of, if I don't say something about what I overheard and something happens, can I live with that, knowing that you could have done something to prevent it? It's not bad to let somebody know that you heard something concerning and have it not be an issue. We get that all the time in the schools. People say something in the heat of the moment that somebody hears and perceives as a threat, and we look into it, and there is no actionable intelligence that person is capable or actually planning on doing it. So just because you report it doesn't mean that person's under arrest. It doesn't mean that person's kicked out of church. It just means that another set of eyes and ears is looking at the situation and determining whether or not people are safe. And then preparation is really important. Every church or organization should have a comprehensive, well thought out safety plan. What that looks like is going to be dependent on you guys. But it should take into account the physical and congregational needs of your organization. And at minimum, you should have a plan on how you're going to handle typical and atypical emergency events, medical issues, active threats, fires. And I sent Pastor John a sample document of what that can look like. And then you want to identify a group of individuals who are going to be able to handle and respond to that situation. Plan for the physical and digital security of the building, and then have easy to follow evacuation plans that people are aware of. And then the most important consideration in my mind is child safety protocols. Did a great job talking about background checks and why they're necessary. They are absolutely necessary and they're inconvenient, but it's really important to know who is in the building and who is having access, especially to children. And then if you do decide to have a security team of some sort, is that security team armed? Are they unarmed? It's a decision that you have to make as a congregation and as a church. But there are arguments in both directions. There have been a lot of active threat situations who have been stopped by a armed, responsible member of the general public who was in the right place at the right time to put a stop to that situation. And then there's the inverse of that, where people who have put themselves in those situations end up failing to hear or to listen to law enforcement, or are not capable of handling the threat and end up hurt by either the attacker or law enforcement because they are not doing what they should be doing. So, armed or unarmed, that's a decision that you have to make, but they should be, regardless, they should be carefully selected, well-trained, vetted, background checks. They should be capable of handling those situations and exercising good judgment, and they should know what the emergency operation plans are. Again, as much as these situations are present in society, it's still a really rare event. I'm not saying you shouldn't plan for it, because you should, but the likelihood of it happening here is minimal. But just because it's probably not going to happen here doesn't mean you shouldn't plan in case it does. That's all I got.
Let's give him a hand. That's time for a couple questions.
I've been in a shooting situation, and what saved all of us was dropping to the floor.
Right.
And I think it's important for people to think about that, especially here in church, dropping in a pew if there should be a shooting.
Yeah, and that's something that you can potentially, we can drill or we can talk about what those responses should look like. Yeah, there are a lot of things that you can do to protect yourself, and talking about it, planning and preparing for that, allow people to be able to make that decision for themselves when that happens, rather than if a person hasn't prepared at all for it, they may freeze and they may not know what to do. So having these conversations and preparing in advance, it equips everybody to be able to respond to the situation the best that they can if and when it happens. Go ahead.
Does having signage saying that this is not a gun-free zone,
I mean, maybe. I mean, is it a deterrent? I don't know, maybe. I think if a person is committed to what they're doing, I don't think typically that's going to discourage them. Most people who are undertaking something like this have prepared for it. They know what the risks are, and they have accepted it. They know that the vast majority of people who perpetrate this type of event don't survive that event, and that's either they go for soft targets, and they're not intending on surviving that. They know that they're either going to be generally killed by law enforcement or they're going to take their own lives. So saying we're armed, does it maybe give them a second thought? Sure, yeah, maybe it does, but the likelihood is they've prepared for this, generally speaking, and I would say probably not going to make a huge difference.
I see your old care. Is that more of a deterrent than concealed?
I mean, for someone who is just randomly walking by and looking and seeing if the area is a soft target, maybe. But for someone who's committed to perpetrating this type of event, probably not. But it does give you the opportunity to respond quicker. And I'm on duty, so I'm required to carry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I heard it in two places, it mentioned a bell, and it seemed contradictory, but I probably didn't get it right. But should we have a bell, and does this bell take cover, or in any case, does it say all clear? And should it be a different bell, two blasts or one blast, or?
Yeah, whatever the bell was more from the school standpoint of where we're going.
The big loud bells.
That's where we're normally talking about this is the schools. So I probably used some terminology that wouldn't be applicable here, but having some way to communicate between classes, whether that's a radio or, I mean, there's a lot of apps that function as a walkie-talkie that you can set up a small group. So you could have, the people who are presenting in classes all on that list and be queued up so that everybody's got their phone and that app is set up correctly. That if something's happening out in the fellowship hall, I push the button on that app and I'm communicating to everybody in the church and saying, hey, something bad's happening, you guys need to take some steps like that. That's a possibility. I mean, intercom systems, bells. I mean, having a signal bell, sure, that could be useful as long as everybody knows what that means. Was lockdown 4 bells or 3? I see a lot of potential for confusion there. Yeah.
I guess I was curious for the personality type, or like what is the person in these cases that if somebody came in to the church and giving direction or started firing, do those people, they're just so intentional you can't talk to them? When you try to talk to them,
typically they're really very singularly focused. But as far as I think kind of what you're asking maybe is more like, what's that person look like and how do I identify them? Is that, or?
No, I'm actually just kind of trying to think that, like some of us, might be inclined to try to talk to them. And is that generally a bad deal?
Yeah, in a situation where there's gunfire or threats of, or some other kind of imminent attack, trying to talk that person down is a bad idea.
Okay.
Get yourself and everybody else to safety. Get the doors locked and let law enforcement deal with that.
A while back, we had a gentleman who came into the church, and he was acting erratic. And 2 or 3 people wanted to talk to him. And I'm thinking, get out of my way. If he goes crazy, I want to deal with him. I want people out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from.
I carry in church, by the way.
I see where you're coming from. If a person is acting a little bit off or erratic or is concerning, I don't know that telling people not to engage with that is the right way to handle that. A lot of times in a general mental health crisis, people want to talk and they want to be heard. So I would say, unless there's an indication that that person's an imminent threat, having a conversation with that person isn't a bad thing. Another person calling law enforcement, like having the foresight to step away and say, hey, we got somebody here that's acting out of sorts and we could really use some help. That might be a better response than saying completely disengage with that person. Like I said, unless there's an indication that that person's an imminent threat.
In my job, I have some angry people. They just want to scream and yell. And if they're just screaming and yelling, they're not going to hurt anybody else. They're totally focused on a single person.
Right.
And so someone calling the cops to come and calm it down is the perfect thing. But to let them vent is appropriate response to.
Yeah. A lot of times people just want to be heard. Once you let them get what it is off their chest, they don't even necessarily want a resolution. They just want to know that they got to speak their piece. So is that going to solve all of the problems? No. It's obviously not a one-size-fits-all solution, but oftentimes when people are ticked off, letting them have their say is a valid way to de-escalate that situation.
When we're in a lockdown situation, in the schools I've been in, they tell us, don't trust anything you hear over the PA system. Don't trust anything that's said through a knocked door. Administrators will have keys, police officers will have keys. They will open the room up for you if it's needed.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Could you repeat what he said, please?
So he said that a lot of times at the schools we tell teachers and students, when we're in a lockdown, unless you hear prior to the lockdown that this is a drill, that we're not opening that door for anybody. That law enforcement or administrative staff is going to be able to get into that area. That's a valid point, and it's something I probably should have mentioned. If you activated that lockdown procedure and you're calling the cops, we'll find a way in. We'll find a way in. We'll take a door if we have to make sure that we get in and get access to everybody. It's not the same as in the schools. In the schools, there's 15, 20 people at the police department who have keys and access to every school in the district. We don't have that for every church. You could put up a Knox box and give us that access, get those keys, but they're expensive, and realistically, if we want to get in, if there's something happening, we will. I'm a little bit famous at the school district during a tabletop exercise for letting people know when they were having some discussion about digital keys being automatically shut off when we hit the lockdown buttons in the offices. And I told them, we'll send a car through the front vestibule or doors. We'll go through a window. We'll go through the doors. We'll get in somehow. That's a really good point. Don't open the door. Let us get access in that situation.
By the way, thank you for your service. I've been in your schools as a resource officer, and I appreciate you guys
Thanks.
a lot.
Anything else?
I sure appreciate Officer Lee, Sergeant Lee coming in, and let's give him another hand. Okay, we just have a little bit more I want to talk about tonight. Really appreciate you being here. Something I wanted to mention about the volunteer training is it not only protects the kids, but it also protects you. I have a friend, pastor, who serves as a pastor. He was not really accused, but there was something that got reported where he was investigated. There was some confusion, something that a kid had said, and he didn't do anything wrong, but it sounded as though he had done something wrong. And it was very serious and extremely stressful for him. thankfully, it was proven to be totally unfounded, and everything was fine because he had followed the proper protocols. Had he not followed the protocols, had he been alone with this child or something and not in public where he had been, then it could have been a very difficult situation, even if he hadn't have done anything wrong. So it's really to protect us as well as the kids that we do these things. And as we know, even a false accusation can be a very painful thing and can have some very difficult consequences. Another thing under general safety I wanted to talk about is if you live by yourself and you come to church by yourself, it would be good for us if we had your emergency contact info. Like, who should we contact if you have a medical emergency? Because I probably don't have your kids' cell phones or your relatives' numbers on hand. It would be good for us to start doing that. So maybe we can start advertising for those things. If what you've heard tonight thus far has been of interest to you and you want to be a part of the conversation for planning to help us put together a plan for safety, let me know. Specifically as we're talking about what Officer Lee was talking about. If that interests you, let me know, and we can have you be a part of that conversation. The final area that we're going to talk about tonight is social safety. We want to be, and I think we're a very friendly church, but we want to continue to be a friendly church, and we want to be safe even amongst each other. And sometimes, without meaning it, we hurt each other. Has that ever happened to you before? You ever gotten offended by something someone does or says, even without trying? It happens. And there are some things that we can do that can be helpful, especially in the world that we live in today. And the first area comes in the area of physical touch. Today, it's just better if we don't touch each other. Now, there are some forms of appropriate touch. What would be an example of appropriate touch? A handshake. Yeah. And if they don't extend their hand to shake your hand, that's okay. We're not going to force a handshake on someone. But these days, that's pretty much it. Without consent, that's pretty much what we are able to do. Maybe a fist bump. Now, if you want to give someone a hug, what should you do? Yeah, the best thing to do is first ask permission. I don't know if you've ever received an unwanted hug. An unwanted hug feels icky, doesn't it? When you're like, I had a really awkward moment years ago when I was greeting a friend. I wasn't sure if she was going for the high five or the hug, and so I thought she was going in for hug, so I'm going in hug, but then she switches to, and it was this really awkward, It would have been way easier had I said, hey, it's really good to see you. It's been a long time. Can I give you a hug? That clears it up. But there are people who don't like to be touched. And so we need to respect that. And if you ask and they say, nope, my kids, my aunt was visiting at her house just today, and my kids will warm up to people and they'll be really enthusiastic and give hugs. But at first, they often are very standoffish. And sometimes at the end, that's how they are. And my wife will say, do you want to give a hug or a high five? Or do you want to wave? Or maybe they don't want to do any of those things. But we're giving them the choice, and so we need to respect others and give them the choice also. And if you're going to hug, unless they're your really good friend, a side hug is the way to go. And definitely, if you're an adult, giving a minor a hug, if they have given you permission, it needs to be a side hug. Makes sense? I think we can all understand why. We're not against hugs and affection, but we have to be very, very careful these days. Then another part of being safe as a church is safe in how we talk to each other and how we treat each other. I like playful teasing. It's fun when it's fun for everybody. Have you ever been teased and it wasn't fun? Yeah. I think about some people. They are the most wonderful people. And I knew that the lady loved me and wouldn't ever want to do something to hurt me. But the way she teased me, it stopped being fun for me. And I was smiling and laughing on the outside, but on the inside, I was thinking, oh, I know she doesn't mean that, but it still really hurts. We have to be careful how we tease. This is not just for kids, it's for adults too. And I've heard of some teasing that was intended to be positive, but it was interpreted as, oh, that's kind of weird. And not everybody gets our sense of humor, so we have to be very careful. Now, let me ask you this. How can you tell if the teasing is positive and well-received, and how can you tell when it's not? Any suggestions or thoughts on that? Okay, body language. So what's an example of body language that maybe gives us the idea that we should stop? What about on our face? Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. What else, Craig? Okay. Yeah. A really simple thing you can do is you can say, hey, I like to tease sometimes, but I don't want to go overboard. Is this okay? You can just ask them, right? You can ask them. What else? Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And we're going to talk about, in fact, I've got a verse here. It should be all positive. I like that. Like a maniac shooting flaming arrows of death is the one who deceives their neighbors and says, I was only joking. Our words matter. And there's a lot that Scripture says about our words, and so we want to make sure that our words are positive. But just pay attention. And certainly the extreme of teasing would be bullying. And if we see any of that that's inappropriate, if you see something, say something. If you hear something, say something. We have a responsibility to make sure that everybody who comes here feels welcome, feels embraced, and that the way that they're treated is they know that they are loved. You could also ask yourself the question, would I like it if someone said that to me? How would I feel? How would Jesus treat other people? What about this one? Ephesians 5:4. There should be, should there be obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse jesting, which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving. I want to be very careful, even what we joke about. Our jokes, if we tell jokes, should be positive and not the sort of thing that can be misinterpreted. Let not any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up, according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. So what comes out of our mouth should be the things that help build each other up, encouraging each other. So we want to look for the nonverbal cues. We talked about that a little bit. If someone is getting upset by something, you want to check in with them. Maybe they're folding their arms. Maybe they're turning away. Maybe they're moving away. If you sit next to somebody and they move away from you, do you think they want to sit next to you? No. That might just mean that they need some space. I went upstairs earlier today. My son Ezra, who loves me so much, he pointed at me and he said, "You go downstairs." Now, does that mean that Ezra doesn't love me? No, of course he loves me. But Ezra was saying, I need space. So if you sit next to somebody and they move away, don't follow them. They need space, right? Yeah.
I grew up in a deaf family, and my mom and dad said, shut up and tell me. because of the era they grew in, it was all verbal. So I'm to fold my arms just like that so I can listen. So if I have my arms folded, it's not that I'm ignoring you and not thinking of what you're thinking. I'm paying attention. So when you see that, please don't be offended. Pick on me. It's good for me.
Now you have permission to pick on him in ways that are positive, okay? Only him. Sometimes, like I try to hold my kid's hand and they pull it away. Now, when we're in a parking lot, I hold on tight, right? But we have to pay attention to these sorts of physical cues. And when we see them and experience them, we need to be careful with that. You can often kind of mirror people's posture. Like, for example, if I want to come up here and talk to Ray, he might get a little uncomfortable if I'm this close to him. Not really. Maybe not him. But if you're talking to somebody and they move back a little bit, it might be because they have a larger bubble of space, right? It also might be because you had garlic like I did, and you have bad breath. And let me know if I have bad breath and give me some mints or some gum. I won't be offended. Never turn down prayer or breath mints. That's what I say. So look at the way they are responding and try to mirror them to help them feel comfortable. Now, yes?
A guy's bad time is one thing. A guy giving a woman a bad time, and a guy giving a woman a bad time is something else.
Yeah, and really what we want to do is we want to give everybody a good time, right? When people come here to visit, we want them to leave saying, wow, those people were so nice. So nice. And I've heard good things about people who have, my in-laws, you know, they told me, boy, that's a friendly church. You have 2 friendly churches. But something that I've observed is churches will often be friendly among themselves, or the people that they're friendly with among themselves, and they think they're really friendly, but then when somebody comes in who's not like them or who is outside of their clique or their group, they don't get treated as friendly. So we have to be careful of that, because we all naturally hang out with the people we like to hang out with and we're used to hanging out with, but you always have to be thinking, how can I expand the circle and make it bigger? How can I expand the circle and make it bigger? So let's talk for a minute about boundaries and bubbles of space. If somebody's doing something that you don't like, here's what you do. You say, please stop. I don't like that. We literally have taught my kids this. There's a whole song. Please stop. I don't like that. I'm feeling uncomfortable. I need more space. Not around me. It's something that's a boundary. It's a bound. Anyways, the kids probably know it a little better than I do. But all you need to know is, please stop. I don't like that. Now, what happens if they continue? If they continue, the next step is walk away and tell someone immediately. Tell a leader. So if you're a child and this is happening to you, talk to someone. If you're an adult and this is happening to you, because adults can have these sorts of challenges also, please stop. I don't like that. If they continue, walk away and tell somebody. We want to make sure that we stop these sorts of things because often it's unintentional. People aren't trying to hurt our feelings or do things to bother us, but sometimes they just don't even realize what they are doing. So that's how we can do that. Really simple. Now, I just covered that. Tell a leader immediately. Just a little bit more here. We talked a little bit about inclusivity. We want to make the circle bigger. If you see somebody sitting alone at potluck, let them keep sitting by themselves, right? No, please. It drives me nuts when I see people sitting alone at potluck. If you see somebody come in, greet them. Greet them. We're trying to do more of that here in church to make sure everybody feels welcomed and invited to potluck or invited to your house, or everybody feels welcomed here. Now, what about for people that we just don't naturally like to hang out with? What do we do about them? It is an eye problem, isn't it? I remember when I was in high school, they assigned our seating for chapel. I had to sit next to this one girl for a whole month. And when I saw that name on the list on the wall in high school, I thought, oh, no, I do not like this person. Had to sit next to her for a month. She's a bad person, not a good person. Well, I sat next to her, and you know what I did? No, I didn't marry her. And that woman is my wife. I got to know her, asked questions. I found out she actually was a really nice person. And by the end of that month, I realized I was the one that had the problem and not them. So you might start by just getting to know the people that you don't like as much or you don't naturally hang out with as much. And you might learn more about their circumstances and what makes them tick. We took a personality test last year. Helen let out in having us do these personality things. It helps us when we understand our personalities. Then we're not as irritated at other people. We see, oh, that's why they do that, because they're choleric or they're melancholy, or that's how their brain is wired. Try to find common points. Somebody in this church, I don't remember who it was, but they said, I used to have a real problem with so-and-so, and it was really difficult with me, but now I got to know this person, and we're doing just great. We can do it. We can do it. Look to expand the circle. I don't know if this has ever happened to you physically, but it's happened to me, where there's a group of people standing around talking, and you're interested. Oh, I want to see what's happening. And you go to go up to the circle, and they're maybe just preoccupied with their conversation that they don't open the circle up. And so you're just standing there awkwardly on the outside looking in. Be the person that opens the circle up and invites the people in, whether it's literal or metaphoric. Who can you greet tomorrow at church that you haven't greeted? It might even involve moving where you sit in order to sit near people, in order to better greet them. That guy Saul who comes here, man, I want to get to know him better. There are people that we want to get to know and be friends with. Love them as the Lord loves them. We don't want to be doing this to people. We want the circle of God's family to grow. 1 Corinthians 16:14 says, let all that you do be done with love. Okay, I know we've covered a lot today. We're about to wrap it up. Are there any questions? We couldn't cover everything, but these are some of the basics and kind of the expectation. And if I'm messing up on this, you talk to me about it. And if you're messing up on it, we want to lovingly help talk to you about it so that we can be the sort of place that's not only physically safe, and we'll work on a plan if there's a disaster or a shooter. We'll work on that plan, but we want to be practicing immediately how we can open the circle more, how we can treat one another with as much love and kindness as we can. So I want to be that sort of person. How about you? Yeah, amen. I really appreciate you being here tonight. Did you get the text message that I sent out? We're going to start doing more of that, not all the time. If you don't like it, you can just reply stop and you can unsubscribe from it. But we're working on improving our communication. And if there are people who only receive voice messages instead of text messages, we can set up a voice broadcast also. But we're working on growing together. And I think that we have some good things that are coming along that we're working on. Thank you for being here. It's late. We're going to close it off. If you need the forms for volunteer stuff, you can just come grab it tonight, and you can turn it in when you have it filled out. Nita can help you with any questions you've got in that regard. All right, let's close with yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we went a little later than I had thought, so let's sing a song together. What's a good song that we can sing, and does anybody want to play a piano? Day is Dying in the West? Could you play that? Or are you going to play it? We could do it a cappella too if we want to. The song is Day is Dying in the West. We're going number 51. Let's do first and last verse. Day is dying in the west, heaven is touching earth with rest. Wait and worship while the night sets her evening lamps with light through all the sky. Holy, holy, Lord God of hosts, heaven and earth are full of thee. Holy, 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 Lord God of hosts, heaven and earth are full of thee. Heaven and earth are praising thee, O Lord Most High. Amen. Let's pray. Dear God, we are so grateful for this Sabbath that we're entering in together. And we came here tonight because we want to be a safe place, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and all the other ways. So give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart that's willing. Give us wisdom as we make plans and as we move forward. And keep us safe as we go home tonight. And again, Lord, we pray for the safety and blessing for those affected by the fire. Lord, bless those in need and those helping to try to contain it. We pray for success. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, thank you for being here. God bless, and we will see you when we see you.